watching part 22 of this series, The Assault on Our Constitution, with special guest and best-selling author Don Brown.
You know, just yesterday, 1st of May, 2nd of May, there was some back and forth going on between the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and the House Intel Committee, chaired by Devin Nunes, as you know, asking for documents. The House Committee wants to see documents which justify issuance of a subpoena to spy on an American citizen in FISA court. Well, Rosenstein and the Department of Justice is not cooperating. It was Congress that established the Department of Justice, but the created is bucking against creator. So they've been asking for these documents, and there's pushback and pushback and pushback by the bureaucrats. So finally, Nunes says, okay, we're going to draft articles of impeachment against you, Mr. Rosenstein, if you don't cooperate. Rosenstein says the Department of Justice won't be, bullied or intimidated by the Congress. Well, the Department of Justice is created by the Congress. You've heard this phrase, congressional oversight. It's up to the Congress to oversee these people. But it's kind of like everything has been flipped on its head. It's a dangerous situation.
Yeah, it can't go on. I mean, it's either we've got to reverse this,
right,
or it's going to collapse. Well, there's no way it can go on.
Well, we've got to go back to the basics.
Yeah.
And so the first question is, which of these agencies should be cut? And I've got it on the screen up, but the fact of the matter is, most of them should be cut. Most of them should be cut. Although our friend Rick Perry could not remember, probably because he was taking powerful medication.
Well, not only that, I talked to his people that day.
Yeah.
They had lined him up to do 5 long interviews that day. He was brain dead.
He was worn out. It would help the best of us. He was worn out.
Yeah.
But it's very, very important we understand the framework of the Constitution and know how to begin to eradicate these agencies. And the first issue is any agency that is not, doesn't have anything to do with the constitutional power of the Congress should be cut. And to understand that, we've got to go back to what we talked about already. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution limits the powers of the federal government. And as we know, we'll see in a minute, these 18 powers that are set forth in Article 1, Section 8, the power to raise an army and navy, the power over immigration we talked about,
right,
power of postal services to raise taxes, these are limited. And if an agency doesn't have anything to do with any of this, it should be cut. Health and Human Services should be cut. It's not the federal government's responsibility to provide welfare. Those agencies should be cut. So that's where you start. But not only that, but any agencies that remain under the executive branch, it's okay to have agencies. That's not a problem. But they should be stripped of their lawmaking abilities.
Yeah.
That has to happen.
Should at least be approved by Congress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And see, the way it is now, they publish so many of these laws in the Federal Register. When you've got thousands of laws being published, and what we showed a moment ago, some of these silly regulations, and silly but also dangerous, because if we ignorantly violate one of them, you can go to prison. They should be stripped away. No bureaucrat should have the ability to publish something in a Federal Register that will send an American citizen to jail. No unelected bureaucrat should have that power. And so remember that the Constitution is set up as a restraining device against government. There are only 18 enumerated powers under Article 1, Section 8. And under the 10th Amendment, any power that is not given to the federal government goes to the states.
Right.
So if there's going to be socialized medicine, which you and I are both opposed to, but if there were going to be that, if there were going to be the functional equivalent of Obamacare or legislation to protect the spotted owl or the blue grasshopper, that should go to the states. Under the 10th Amendment, any of these agencies should be eliminated, and we should strip right down to the basics. And to be honest with you, we should probably go back only to the original 4 cabinet positions: Department of Defense, the Department of Defense, the Department of Treasury, Department of State, and we should probably just keep it there. But it was Congress that created this deep state over the years. It grew like a cancer. Congress advocates its responsibility by allowing these bureaucrats to make laws. And we need to understand how it happened so that we can intelligently push our congressmen to make changes. Now, I've got a few suggestions. These are mine. You may or may not agree, so I'll say, but I would put the number of the congressional switchboard up there, 202-224-3121. We need to start burning that switchboard up, and we need to demand the elimination of certain agencies. We need to eliminate the EPA. We need to eliminate the IRS. We need to eliminate Health and Human Services. We need to eliminate the Department of Education. It's not the federal government's role to educate.
Yeah, and when we're saying eliminate these, we're not saying don't protect the environment. We're saying put that where it's supposed to go. Let the states regulate their own thing.
That's
eliminate
exactly
the IRS. You know, that is completely out of bounds.
Well, there was no IRS till 1913.
Yeah,
you know, there was no income tax. There were revenue measures to collect revenue, but that all blew up with the income with 1913.
We'll be right back after this message.
Moment of Truth by Mark Nuttall. Mark Nuttall exposes our government's addiction to spending and power. I See a New America by Rick Joyner. This book addresses practical solutions for a bright future for America. Back to the Future by Carla Perry. Rediscover what made America great and how to return to those principles in the future God intended for this nation. The Boys of 76 by Charles Coffin. Read through accounts of the sacrifice, faith, and courage it took to make America a free nation. These 4 products retail for $82.90. Get them in our Moment of Truth special for only $55, plus free shipping on domestic orders. Call 888-778-7141 or visit store.morningstarministries.org.
We're called to speak themes that heaven is unfolding to the nations so that we can be in cooperation with what Jesus is building on the face of the earth. And he wants those individuals to have depth of character so that you don't discredit what he's speaking through you and in you. The weightiest matter that was in the heart of God is to provide a bride for his son, and part of the assignment of MorningStar is to help perfect that bride in the end-time church. Yes.
I would say repeal the Federal Register Act. Or if you're going to have a Federal Register Act, at least eliminate mandatory rulemaking abilities on the people. You know, if you're going to, again, I have no problem with the Department of Defense, you know, having regulations, you know, requiring pilots, you know, to have uncorrected vision if that's what's needed for safety. Maybe not so much anymore, but whatever it is, or you know, you've got to be a certain weight, certain height to fly an F-22. That's okay, but that's not putting.
That's internal. That's not putting it on the American people. Yeah.
So therefore, I would say also repeal Civil Service Reform Acts to make it almost impossible to fire bureaucrats. It should not be that federal bureaucrats have more power and more protection than the people who are paying their salaries.
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening now. You and I are paying their salaries, and they got a lot more protection than we do. They got better benefits than we do. You can't fire them.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about draining the swamp. One of the things that makes it so very, very difficult, you know, Trump says he wants to drain the swamp, but when you've got 97% of 2.8 million employees under the law as it's now set, giving them 30 days notice, giving them their right to counsel, giving them their right to a hearing in the Merit System Protection Board, and from there giving them a right to go to a United States Court of Appeals before you can get rid of them.
Yeah, which could take years. They would load it up for years.
And these laws need to be changed so that federal bureaucrats are treated like American citizens, treated like the folks that they work for.
And Trump has actually tried to do that.
He's
tried to
working at it.
slip that on or put that into a couple of bills.
He's working at it, and the Trump administration has repealed, to its credit, more of these regulations in a short period of time, 15 months, whatever it's been now, than any president in our lifetime. So you got to give them a lot of credit there.
They're actually repealing 22 for every one that has been added.
And that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And the Congress also needs to step in and fix it. The Administrative Procedures Act, which is what makes these regulations the law of the land, the force and effective law, needs to either be fully repealed or regulations that mandate compliance by American citizens, making you as an airline pilot report any illness that's not flight sickness, as if you have medical qualifications to do that or go to jail. That needs to be eliminated. Those types of regulations need to be eliminated because no unelected bureaucrat should be able to pass anything to take your property, your life, your liberty from you or from me or from anyone else. And we just got to enforce and restore separation of powers. We've got to get back to what the Constitution is. We have to understand that the rulemaking power should be in Congress. It is a document designed to limit the power of the government. But when you're looking at hundreds and thousands of regulations that are passed that can't even read, the federal government is not limited. It's exploding like a cancer. And they call it the Constitution, these left-wing advocates of big government, a living, breathing document, but it's all about usurping more power for themselves. But we got to get educated because it was like Solomon said, that without a vision, the people perish. So we have to know from whence we came and where we're going. And I think we get educated and keep praying, keep working, we got a shot at turning this thing around.
Well, I think that's about as good a clear an explanation as we could have on what the deep state is. And, you know, right now, I think it is having a greater impact on our country. I mean, because these guys, without having to go through a process like the Congress does to make a law, they just throw it up on the Federal Registry. Nobody objects in 30 days. It's law.
Right.
And, you know, without Congress overseeing this, somehow taken back where nothing becomes a law of the land that they do not at least approve, which is constitutional, which, you know, we're going to keep having this thing explode out of control.
That's correct.
Now, Trump is reining it back in. But, I mean, just under the last administration, the explosiveness of regulations just under Obamacare.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and here's another way it affects us. I know you've probably dealt with this in your law practice. But I know doctors that before Obamacare were spending a huge amount of their time just doing paperwork.
Right.
They said they could have radically cut cost of health care if it weren't for the regulation, which nobody's going to read all these reports.
Correct.
And then with Obamacare, they said it doubled or more in some areas. Some of them were spending a third to a half of their time just trying to comply with the regulations.
Well, we talked about this. There was a famous quote by Nancy Pelosi, we've got to pass it to know what it says. But what happens is when the Congress does pass a law, take Obamacare, for example, that law was hundreds of pages and 3,000 pages just on the law itself. But once the law is passed and the Congress didn't know what's in the law, then the bureaucrats from Health and Human Services go 300,000.
Yeah, it's like 50,000
exactly.
pages.
And what you were talking about, the inability of doctors to, it killed the medical profession. You know, my mom, passed away 3 years ago, and my sister and I were with her for the last 4 months. We would take turns, and she was up at her last couple of months were at UNC Hospital at a cardiac CPU, a cardiac intensive care unit. The doctors were fabulous, the nurses were fabulous. We were very grateful to them. She had been at East Carolina before that. But the one common thing that we observed and really frustrated the nurses and frustrated the healthcare providers is they were having to spend so much time outside the room buried in a computer because of all the coding requirements. Every little thing they had to do had to be coded under these Obamacare regulations, which takes time away from being able to be with patients, and it frustrates our healthcare. Yeah, and that's just one of many, many examples. Yeah. And of course, now what's happened is middle class can't afford health insurance. I mean, it's gotten to the point because of a lot of the mandates. Middle class can't afford it at all, and those who can't afford it have to wait forever for the most part. So that's just one of many, many, many examples as to how this monster has basically taken control.
Well, I hope you've begun to grasp. I mean, Don, you did a great job in 50 minutes. Well, I mean, you really laid out a picture. I know sometimes you may need to stop, hit pause, think about these things. Check them out for yourself. Right. Check them out for yourself. But one of the things I'd like to close with this, Winston Churchill, a book was written about him called The Prophetic Statesman. Right. And he foresaw so many things that would be a threat to mankind. He foresaw World War I accurately, World War II, the Cold War, how to win the Cold War without firing a shot, which Reagan embraced Churchill's strategy, and it worked. One of the things he saw as one of the greatest threats to humanity was a bureaucracy that was run amok, running out of control, growing without a control, that was like a huge cancer just consuming the resources of nations. Listen, we're there. We're there. Our bureaucratic form of government, what is being called the deep state that is imposing all these regulations and laws on us, are threatening to bring the whole house down. Something has to be done about it. So, use these phone numbers. Call your congressman. Speak out about it. Get more educated on it. We try to I know Don has years and years of experience. And what we try to do, one of the things we try to do in this program, what maybe took him many years to understand, condense it down to you get it in an hour or a couple of hours. But there are resources available. We're the sovereign in our country. If we don't take our country back, it's going to run aground here pretty quick.
And it starts with us getting educated, taking that education, and ring the phones off with our members of Congress. This stuff has got to be cut. And they have the power. The Congress still does have the power of the purse, which is why sometimes a member of Congress can still help. But people get in trouble all the time, whether it was the IRS or the State Department or whatever, and sometimes members of Congress can help. And the reason they're able to do that, to be able to help with the deep state at times, is because these deep state actors know that Congress controls their budget. Yeah. The power of the purse is still the power that would allow Congress to step in. We have to understand that, and we have to hold our feet to the fire.
We absolutely have to do something. If all of us would speak out about this, it would be heard. They will hear that. And we've also got to elect leaders, not just politicians. We've got to get leaders in office on every level of government who will lead and will manage us properly if we're going to see this fixed. One of the things that the Lord said would determine whether we were either a good and faithful servant or a wicked, evil slave had to do with stewardship. The parable of the talents, how you handled the resources entrusted to you. And I tell you, this country has been entrusted to us, the people. Are we going to allow it to continue to be abused and run amok the way that it is? Or are we, the people, going to demand real and effective leadership? Thank you for joining us on Prophetic Perspectives.
into every crack and crevice, right down to our bones. Let the oil come, 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 let the healing oil come, let the oil come, let the oil come, let the healing oil come.
Moment of Truth by Mark Nuttall. Mark Nuttall exposes our government's addiction to spending and power. I See a New America by Rick Joyner. This book addresses practical solutions for a bright future for America. Back to the Future by Carla Perry. Rediscover what made America great and how to return to those principles in the future God intended for this nation. The Boys of 76 by Charles Coffin. Read through accounts of the sacrifice, faith, and courage it took to make America a free nation. These 4 products retail for $82.90. Get them in our Moment of Truth special for only $55, plus free shipping on domestic orders. Call 888-778-7141 or visit store.morningstarministries.org.
We're called to speak themes that heaven is unfolding to the nations so that we can be in cooperation with what Jesus is building on the face of the earth. And he wants those individuals to have depth of character so that you don't discredit what he's speaking through you and in you. The weightiest matter that was in the heart of God is to provide a bride for his son, and part of the assignment of MorningStar is to help perfect that bride in the end time church. Yes.
If you're familiar with MorningStar worship, you know that we're different than everybody else, and you know that the people that come out of MorningStar, many famous worship leaders that come out of our school, they're different. They have something special, and that something special is what we desire to continue at MorningStar's worship school. That the people that come to this school, when they come in, they may come in one way, but they're going to walk out a different way. I believe that this school is different because we're different. And we're not trying to make cookie cutter worship leaders or cookie cutter musicians. We're actually looking to find what's inside of that person, that God put inside of that person, and bring that out of them so that when they come into the school, we have not put our stamp on them. We have actually put God's stamp of creativity inside of them. I believe that the best music is coming. I believe that the best worship is coming. That there's worshipers alive right now that don't even know their calling yet. And I believe that this school is for those people that God has called to go to a much higher level in Him and also in their training on their instruments, so that when they get in situations where God wants to use them, they don't balk because they've been trained well on their instruments. So MorningStar Worship School starts at the end of August this year. We're taking applications now. There'll be some information on the screen that'll tell you more about it.
On TV, online, on the go, and on your iPad. Tune into Prophetic Perspectives with Rick Joyner, always available on MorningStarTV.com.